I work now with about 15 private equity firms. I coach their CEOs. Empire Builder was the roadmap, and secret, truth be told, Empire Builder is my favorite book of the four.
How important is competitive advantage, or a moat, as some people call it?
Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling.
And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Adam Coffey. Adam Coffey is the CEO of private equity companies in the past, best-selling author, been on many stages, helped many of other private equity style companies and entrepreneurs like us who are out there buying, selling, and growing companies through acquisition. Just a real pillar in the community. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for being here today.
Ron, it's good to see you. Hello to all your listeners out there. It's like I feel like you're a long lost friend. It's like we're starting to make this a regular thing, and I keep writing books. You keep having me on. It's like it works. So good to see you.
We gotta have Adam on here. You're one of the anytime
I got to crank out a new book just so I can talk to my good friend here. Yeah.
And every time we put you on here, it's usually one of my best viewed thing. We get hundreds more, if not 1,000 plus more views above the average for any show you're on. So I'm
Well, good. I'm glad I add some value to somebody out there.
Great sauce for the show, man. Great sauce for the show. So as I like to.
Good.
So you got a new book out, man. Tell us about why you. And it's an update. It's a second edition. Let's just kind of jump right into. Let's take a step back. For the people out there who haven't heard the show 1 or the show 2 we've done with you, because this will be our third one, give them a little bit of background to who you are so we can build a little rapport with the listener. They'll love you. They'll love who you are, and we'll continue on with your what we're up to now.
Yeah, sure, Ron. Well, so listen, I think life is all about our experiences and their attitude. I'm 60 years old. I just turned 60 this summer. I rode a hurricane for my 60th birthday. I was in Cancun when Beryl slammed in on July 4th, and it was fun, actually. It was like I couldn't have ordered a better 60th birthday. It's like I rode a hurricane for 60. But, in terms of just life experiences in general, it's like I'm a veteran, U.S. Army. I know you're a veteran, and, thank you for your service. Military taught the young 1.0 version of me, something about teamwork, discipline, leadership, how to never give up, how to just always figure out how do I go through the wall, over the wall, around the wall, under the wall, but never fail, never quit. Military was a great start to my career. From there, I was an engineer. Engineering made me a very meticulous planner. And you know what? Life throws us curveballs and things happen. I was a CEO when planes flew into buildings. We just had the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. And so we plan. I was a CEO during the Great Recession, CEO during the pandemic, and we make plans, and then life throws us curveballs. I think it was, Mike Tyson who said, everybody has a plan until I punch them in the nose, right? So, but we revert to our training. We revert to the knowledge of how to plan, work through an obstacle, et cetera. And so engineering made me meticulous at that. I'm a pilot. I don't take off unless I know where I'm going, and I deconstruct the trip. And boy, was that a useful skill when I started running companies for private equity, because private equity firms own companies for about 5-year periods. We start with an end game in mind, and then we reverse engineer the journey, and we build and head for that exit. So being a pilot taught me that. Jack Welch, 10 years at GE, during the heyday of GE. Jack was the world's most admired CEO, GE, number 1 on the Fortune 500 list. Tech doesn't exist at that time. GE taught me how to run a business. And then I spent 21 years as a CEO running and building 3 large national companies, international companies, for 9 different private equity firms, $2.5 billion in exits. I bought 58 companies during that time period, and buy and build guy, turnaround guy, and I got bored. I just got bored, and I was tired of running just one company. I wanted to impact many, so I hung up my CEO cleats and said, "I'm done being a CEO." And I started a consulting business. I work now with about 15 private equity firms. I coach their CEOs. I help them evaluate investments, sit on boards, invest in funds. And then I work with 68 different founders. I told you when we were off camera, I'm working on 18 buy and builds right now. And then I still teach. I'm still writing books, and and I'm enjoying it. I'm loving it. So I'm working actually more hours today than when I was a CEO. I have clients literally on every continent. So I'm doing calls like at weird hours of the day and night so that I can make myself a little bit more accessible for some of my overseas clients, but having fun. And that's the key. I think, life has to remain fun. If it's a drag to get up every day, that makes success that much harder to find. So I'm having fun. Life is good. I'm committed to cranking out a book, every other year. So this was supposed to be my off year. We were together when I launched Empire Builder last year, and this is supposed to be the off year, but here I go, right? So my first book was the Private Equity Playbook, and that thing just sells like you would not believe. It has a cult following. It's required reading at several universities and in the MBA program, but I felt it was time to update it. I wrote the first version in 2018. And the world's really changed quite a bit since 2018. We had a pandemic, we had the high interest rates and inflation, and the supply chain meltdown and the quiet quitting movement. Just so much had happened to the world that I felt it was time to kind of go back and revisit. And numbers are updated. I expanded content, and the whole goal and objective was I wanted to keep the book relevant for call it another 5-10 years down the road from there. And the weird thing is, because there's a different ISBN, I can't kill the first edition. The first edition's still out there. It still is outselling the second edition, and the second edition's got the first edition in it, plus it's updated and it's got expanded content. Now they both sell really well, and I'm like, well, folks, I tried my best to help you out, and but hey, the fact that people still want to read the first edition, I'm pleased with that. I donate all my royalties to charity. It's several $100,000, and so it helps fuel my philanthropic work, which is great, and way for me to give back. I give back to the business community by teaching, and by writing books, and then that helps me give back to through my charities by giving and donating the royalties. So that's kind of what's been going on in my world. How you been?
Doing all right. Reminds me of a saying I think my mom or my dad used to say, like, we buy the kids the books, we send them to school, and what do? They eat the damn books. Right?
Yeah.
But you do what you can, and the audience and the community will do what they do. Kudos for you for putting the information out there. It's a favorite book for many people in the circle. I hear it all the time.
Can I tell you something funny too? It's like when the fourth, so my publisher, anytime I come out with a new book, they make all my books on the Kindle version 99 cents. And all 4 of my books were number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the newest book was number 4. I think probably because at the time when it comes out, it doesn't have as many reviews written. So the one with the most reviews, kind of takes top billing, and people see it more frequently, so they buy it. So I'm trying to get to 4th number 1 international bestseller status, and my 3 first books are clogging the road. But finally the 4th book, kind of jumped up. And so I have to rethink that strategy with them next time. It's like when book 5 comes out, I don't know if I'm going to make them all 99 cents until the 5th book gets to where it needs to be, so I can check the box. So I was a little nervous there for a while, but thank you to your listeners and LinkedIn, all the people around the world out there who helped me get there. So 4 number 1 international bestsellers.
They hit number one in another country before it hit number one here too, didn't it? I seen a
Yeah,
LinkedIn
so
post. Australia,
Australia, the
yeah.
day starts in Australia
Right.
first. And so my friends down under, of which there are many, kind of help me launch a book
Hmm.
first. And it usually would hit number one in Australia before it makes its way to number one in the US. And something readers or your listeners may not know is, when you pre-order a book, it actually detracts from your potential number one status because you don't get credit in launch week for pre-sales that happened a month before the book launched. And so pre-sales don't really help. So that's, people ask, are there pre-sales? There are, and they're there, but I try not to highlight them because they don't really help me when launch week comes. It's not like I'm Stephen King or something and I write a book and 90 million copies are sold on day one. So I have to be careful with that volume.
Yeah. So what's the premise of the books? Tell the audience your track record and why people want to read something about private equity that you've written, because you have a hell of a
Yeah,
track
well,
record.
first, let me just say, let's just talk private equity for just a second. So when I wrote the first edition, I wrote my first book, first edition Private Equity Playbook in 2018. At the time, I'm using 2017 statistics that were published, and the world of private equity was 2.83 trillion in assets under management, and there were 5,391 firms or something like that in existence. You roll tape forward 4 or 5 years, and now private equity is over 6 trillion in assets under management. There's over 8,000 firms, and finally eclipsed the mark where 50% of all companies bought, sold, and financed on the planet are bought, sold, or financed by or to private equity or a private equity backed strategic or funded by private equity. It is such a massive force. As an economy, it would be like the third largest country in the world. But it really it impacts the entire landscape for entrepreneurs. So whether we sell to private equity or not, private equity has created the ability for us to start companies, build them, and sell them and get wheelbarrows full of money. So we really need a good understanding of how it works. And so the Private Equity Playbook, first or second edition, it's kind of designed to give a layperson a really good working understanding of private equity. And even to this day, 5 years after I wrote the first edition, if I teach a seminar, you put 1,000 people in a room and I teach a seminar based on the book. If I give a basic 10-question multi-choice quiz on private equity, I tell you 90% of the room fails. Still, to this day, entrepreneurs who are building companies hear what, about private equity, but they don't know how it works. And we really need to know how it works in order to manipulate that capital stack and give it what it needs, returns for its investors, and take from it what we want, which is capital to grow and expand and wealth when the business is sold. And so people need to understand private equity. So the first book, and the fourth, because the fourth is the update of the first, I felt like Marty McFly, in Back to the Future. I've got some cute little references to that in the book because I'm like, I'm telling you something. I'm referring you to book 2 and 3, but this is book 1, but it's book 1 redone. So it's book 4. So I felt like I was doing a Star Wars trilogy or something, but at any rate, it's like, those books are their subject matter. So, and then Exit Strategy was really about how to maximize the potential of your business when you're thinking about an exit coming, and what's it going to be like, and what's that process look like, and how do I maximize potential. Empire Builder was the roadmap, and secret, truth be told, Empire Builder is my favorite book of the 4. It's the roadmap. So if you're an entrepreneur starting a business or thinking about buying a company and starting on this journey, Empire Builder is the roadmap. It's the treasure map. It'll give you kind of the guidelines on how to do this whole thing successfully, and generate wealth for your families. And so it's been fun. I engage with all my readers all over the globe. They reach out to me, and I do my best to respond to everybody. I'll tell you that you're doing okay when there's fake Adam Coffeys out there on Instagram and on Facebook and Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, folks. Don't interact with Adam Coffey on Instagram or Facebook. I promise you, someone's going to try to monetize you, and you are not talking to me. But they're lifting my stuff all over the internet. I tell Meta doesn't care. So, I'm on LinkedIn, and I respond to everybody that reaches out to me. So that's why it's important for us to understand private equity, because private capital, we were talking off camera in the green room. We were talking about people wanting to raise capital. And I'm trying to buy a company and I need capital. And if maybe I don't want to go the SBA route, or I want to try to put together some kind of a fund, how do I do that? It's like private equity is the world's largest non-bank lender. And so high probability, if I'm not using an SBA backed, or I can't qualify for a commercial bank loan with one of the big banks, then, it's like I'm using mezzanine lenders and I'm trying to raise capital. And you really need to understand how the private equity world works. So I think I talked about that one long enough. It's like, so I'm working on 18 buy and builds. A lot of people are doing it. A lot of people are starting to catch on that, hey, maybe instead of starting from scratch and trying to claw my way to success, maybe buying a company is a better path to take, which I personally think it is. I can waste a lot of time, money, and effort trying to build something from scratch, and odds are just stacked in against me that I'm going to be successful. But I can buy a company that's been in business for 10, 15 years, has a history of revenue and earnings, and I can pay fair market value for that company. And I already know I can be successful because it's still here 15 years after it started. And so learning the kinds of companies to buy and how to finance them, creatively and get in the game. That's that I think is a common path I'm seeing now. And I'm seeing a lot of people doing mini buy and build. So what's better than buying one? Let's buy 2, 3, or 4. Let's generate cash flow. Let's use the cash flow in the company to service the debt, put them together, get some synergies, grow it, sell it, and make a ton of money. I'm seeing tons of people out there doing that. And that's what most of my clients are doing.
Yeah, we have one we're working on now. It's cabinet makers. So cabinet, or some places they call them flat pack manufacturer.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we have one that I'm on a team that's doing it. They've acquired one in Brisbane, Australia already, and I'm on the team that's bringing it here to the U.S. And we're currently just in the last couple of months starting to talk to cabinet making companies here. So, but it's
Fabulous. I'm doing one in the adhesives industry. So it's like, our simpatico, it's like my glue in your panels and, and the lamination and all that stuff. It's like, and that's an Australian company too. So lot going on in the world, a lot of people having fun, making money. And I think that's what life's all about. And it just, one last point on that is just, baby boomers. Let's talk baby boomers. So I am the last of the baby boomers. Baby boomers were born 1946 through 1964. I was born in 64. I just turned 60. So the youngest baby boomer is 60. The oldest baby boomer is 74 or whatever it is, and you know what? This entire generation of business owners is going to be exiting stage left over the next 10 years. And just this transfer of wealth potential between generations. Not a better time on the planet to be thinking and looking at and buying companies than today.
I like that the sentiment about buying buying versus building is changing. We're taught in school, we're taught in the entrepreneurial world, we're taught by anybody that's an entrepreneur that if you got an idea, you got to start a business and go create one. And nobody actually sits down and looks at the statistics of that, right? You got to have an idea. You got to figure out the market wants. You got to get that product market fit. Does the market even want what you've got? I've spent
Yeah.
considerable amount of money, built something that I thought was awesome and solved a huge problem, only to find out that nobody in the market wanted it. They didn't want it at all.
Yeah. Been there, done that a time or two myself. Right. So,
So
yeah, it's like, again, so 34 million small companies just in the US, only 7% get to $1 million in revenue and only 40% are profitable. That tells you what the odds are of you finding success. And then everybody overthinks startups too. They're all, well, I got to create the sexiest damn thing the world's ever seen. And so I try too hard, and I try to disrupt something. And it's like, you know what? You can create a boring company in a boring industry, make a lot of money. And frankly, you can buy a boring company in a boring industry that's got good fundamentals and make a ton of money. So it is becoming more popular. I actually like seeing it. I think we have a new generation of entrepreneurs out there who are recognizing that wealth does not come from being a W-2 employee.
How important is competitive advantage or a moat, as some people call it, the ability to keep others out to you? And that's the only concern I have about bookkeeping and stuff is like I can think of family friends. I can tell you right now, I have at least 5 family friends who are solo entrepreneurs who have really good bookkeeping businesses. That's what they've been doing for 20 something years, right?
Yeah.
But in my mind, there's no moat to that business. It's a, low cost software, so many dollars per month, less than
Yeah.
$100 a month for QuickBooks and, knowledge in their head. So what's the competitive advantage? Are you buying companies that have a strong brand, like what keeps them?
So I used to, I'll be honest with you. I mean, you're bringing up a really, really good point. So we call that barriers to entry. And every company I've ever sold is part of an investment bank strategy. We're trying to say why there is a moat, and why there is these barriers to entry. And I'm gonna tell you that I think how I generate the majority of the wealth and the profit in doing a buy and build is from arbitrage. And arbitrage is naturally occurring. I don't have to really do anything to make it happen. So there are no real barriers of entry to, I'll call it, bookkeeping and accounting firms. And that's why they sell for low prices. So if I've got no money or I want to use other people's money, it's like I can buy them cheap because they're plentiful. And as you're saying, it's like, so let's say that, well, first of all, I got to be an accountant, or I have to have a finance background. I mean, I have to have something up here to do this. So there's some intelligence level barrier of entry, but assuming I've got that, you're right. I need QuickBooks. I need some, I need some computers. I can sit at home and do it. Don't need an office. I don't need trucks. I don't need sprayers like for pest control or lawnmowers like for landscape maintenance companies. But I think why it still works is the fact that because there's 1.8 million of them and there's 34 million small companies in the US and these are cheap, as I buy them and put them together, I'm climbing the pyramid. I'm climbing up to the clouds. And so 34 million small companies in the US, but only 3,000 companies at the top of the pyramid that have $1 billion in revenue on the planet. So we go from hundreds of millions of companies globally down here to only 3,000 at $1 billion. And so as I get bigger, I become rare really quickly. And so while there's a lot of accounting firms in the US, just as the US numbers and statistics are fresh in my head, not global, there's very few middle-sized ones. There's Deloitte and KPMG and the big boys, and then there's 1.8 million small ones, but very few that have 10 million in earnings or 15 million in earnings. And so most of them are like between 300,000 and a million in earnings. And those are, I don't want to call them a dime a dozen, but they are. They're literally a dime a dozen. And so I can pay fair market value, which is low. I can put a bunch together. I'm kind of climbing above the pack of the 34 million small ones. And I'm starting to get up into rarer territory where bigger PE funds can now swoop in, put more capital to work, and kind of take it from there. And so I think that barriers of entries in some industries are important, but at the same time, it's a numbers game. And even though there is a low, because the other example would be like landscape maintenance. Let's be honest, right? I need a pickup truck and a lawnmower, a weed whacker, and a blower. Not a big barrier to entry. I need 2 legs and I got to be able to push a lawnmower. But if I can do that, I am a landscape maintenance company. But yet there have been multiple multi-billion-dollar platforms built by private equity in that industry, and they are doing it again. And it's like rinse and repeat because more people keep coming in. It's still highly fragmented,
Right.
and the arbitrage component still works. And
There's a
so I personally am less concerned now about barriers to entry than I used to be earlier in my career.
that's the answer I was looking for. It's like, I have a spreadsheet that myself and a couple other guys put together, and it's, It's a weighted average of things we think are important to qualify for a good roll-up, right? And we weight
Yeah.
things differently. So different, like, do they have a competitive advantage? Do they have a moat, right? Do they have a barrier to entry? That was always weighted fairly high on us just because that's what we were told we were supposed to do. And I started listening to
Yeah.
you and other people. And you're about the fifth or sixth person I've talked to that says they're rolling up accounting firms that are rolling up this stuff. And I was like, but where's the barrier to entry? Why does it, does it not matter? And I got the answer now. It doesn't, so long as you play the game right. If you know how it's played, and you're going for the arbitrage, and you can, if
Yeah.
you go back to the mowing thing like that, it still has a little bit of barrier of entry because you have to be a local service. Somebody has to be able to show up and ride a mower there. Nowadays, with the accounting firms, one of our biggest sponsors, who last year he went on to create his own podcast, so he's no longer a sponsor now, but I still love the guy. He has one of those. He's bought 4 companies. He's got an accounting firm, a bookkeeping, I should say, his bookkeeping firm. He bought 4 or 5. That's how he grew it. He's still doing it. And, but it's all remote. Not 2 of his employees live in the same location. Some of them live overseas.
Yeah.
And
I'm seeing that more and more too. And not only that, but I'd say a lot of bookkeeping and accounting firms have back offices in India,
yep,
or the Philippines, or, someplace where the labor rates are much cheaper. And so they may have a CPA in the US, or, a leader in the US, and they may not even be a CPA. And they have some, I'll call it staff accountants if they're bigger, but they've got a lot of back office support now in third world countries. Not to call India a third world country, but massive ability to leverage a lower cost offshore component where you're paying a competitive wage in India or the Philippines, but you're getting college educated people who can do the work. And so that's lowering the cost, raising the profit margins even further. And, boy, it's recurrent. It's like you sign a contract, you forget it. It's like, hey, I'm a CEO who's had billions of dollars in exits. I'm not an accountant. I have one that does my books for my consulting business because I don't play an accountant on TV. I'm not an accountant. And, frankly, it's like if someone tells me, hey, Adam, why don't you go adjust your chart of accounts and start making journal entries? And I'm like, oh, my God, I'm going to screw this up in no time flat. So there is an expertise to that. But we talked about landscape maintenance. I mean, there's so many kinds of companies out there, so many opportunities to buy pre-existing businesses that are already strong cash performers. And so let's talk about, you and I are talking about recurrent revenue, but for people out there listening who maybe don't know what we're talking about, think of it this way. I made a bunch of money in HVAC, so I'm not knocking HVAC. I can make money anywhere. But when I'm teaching a novice how to do something, I'm trying to stack the odds in their favor. So let's talk about that HVAC company for a minute. So let's say you're a residential HVAC company, and this month you sell me a new HVAC system because I need one. Well, guess what? I don't need one every year. I need one every 15 years. So next month, you need to find a new me just to get back to even, to make up for the sale that you did this month. You start the month at 0, and now you got to go find another HVAC system to sell, to install. And we do service work, and they break, and so I get some of that revenue too. But at the end of the day, it's like it's a mostly a project based or a break fix time and materials type operation. And so I was running a giant HVAC company and refrigeration company, and every month I wake up and I don't know where 80% of my revenue is going to come from. I've also run businesses like a medical service company where 90% of my revenue was billed on the first of the month, and then it was collected. That pest control company bills out 90% of their revenue on the first of the month on credit cards, and 3 days later, the money's in the bank. And so some businesses just lend themselves to being financed, having a better predictable cash flow stream, which is so important, when you're an entrepreneur who's building or taking on debt in order to make a transaction happen. So, the profile of the kind of company really matters. And so I use a framework, needs-based, not wants. My wife wants a new outfit. I need the HVAC, system to work when I'm in Texas and it's 110 degrees outside. I need that AC working, so needs,
I
wants,
have a
contracted versus project, recurring and recurrent. And boy, there's so many good companies out there when you think about different industries. And I think about just another one with low barriers to entry but hard to scale. And so the barrier becomes, as you build it, you get bigger, and that's your barrier to entry, is your scale, you're rare. But even like janitorial service companies, I sign a contract. My crews go clean offices every night. And every month I send out an invoice, I get paid. It's like I know where the revenue's coming from. I may have a collection cycle of 30 days, 50 days, whatever it is, but I know where the revenue's coming. And when I find a new customer, it adds on to the pile that I've already got, rather than I had HVAC, that job's gone, I got to find one to replace it. And then the second job adds potentially some growth. So it's, different companies, different industries, not all created equal, but you can really, literally, I can make money anywhere.
go back to the I love this concept. Most of the people listening here are dreaming of doing what you're doing every day. They're buying companies. They're calling themselves acquisition entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship through acquisition, whatever the acronym you want to use. Their goal is to buy one or more companies, grow it, and sell it to private equity. And you've written the playbook on that. So give us some highlights from that playbook. Pre-sell the the game plan that these people have to have in
Yeah.
order to achieve their goal.
Yeah. So the concept and premise is that private equity firms have funds that come in all sizes and shapes, but they all do the same thing. So they all have about a 10-year window. They have a 10-year window, 5 to 6 years to invest capital. They'll hold a company on average 5 years, and then they'll sell it. And because they're all investing 6 to 8% of their fund in one company and never more than 12%, big funds buy big companies, little funds buy little companies. And so we've got these 5 layers of capital, I call it. Each one's like 5 years in width. So it's a pyramid with 5 steps going to the top. And each step is about a 5-year journey. If I buy it this size, in 5 years, I get it here and I sell it to the next firm up who goes from here to here. And it's like I've got this naturally occurring activity that's going on out there. And so the cardinal sin of private equity is not investing their capital. So let me explain the why. So I am a limited partner. I'm an investor in several private equity funds. And usually when I work with a PE fund, they let me invest in the employee co-invest fund. I don't have to pay carried interest and management fees and what have you, because I'm helping them, with their funds. And so I get a little inside track. But when I'm in that fund, I'm expecting a certain level of return. And the stock market over a 30-year period averages about an 8% return per year. And private equity is averaging 16+%. Good funds, 16 to 20%. And so I'm looking for double the S&P 500. But I have to hold my capital because I don't send it to them in the beginning of the 10-year fund life. They don't want it. They don't want my money up front, because if they take it, they have to calculate their returns based on when they grab it. So they only take it when they're going to buy a company. So I commit giving money to a fund, and they have 5 years to invest it, 5 to 6 years. And so I have to hold that money out. Can't invest it in the stock market. I have to leave it liquid, leave it ready to go, because if the stock went down, I now don't have the money I committed to them. It's like I got to have that. And if I don't have it, they're never going to let me invest in a fund again. So I have to hold it out. But if I don't get it invested because they never call it, not only do I not get the 16 to 20% I was banking on, but I also didn't get the 8% that I could have gotten the S&P 500, and now I'm pissed. And they come back to me and say, Adam, we're raising a new fund, give us 5 million. And I'm like, you didn't put my last 5 million to work, screw you. And then they go out of business. And so that means that there's 6 trillion in assets under management. There's over a trillion. I read between 1.2 and 1.9 in assets, that are committed, looking for something to buy. It's called dry powder in the industry. And so they have to buy stuff.
Yep.
And if you're a bigger fund that buys above the 34 million small companies, you need a company to buy. And so when I'm building a company, what I'm really doing is I'm serving up a meal to private equity, to the smallest private equity funds. And I'm saying, here you go, buy this. And they swoop in and grab it. And that's where I'm making my money today. In previous years, when I'm working for them, I'm buying 20, 30 companies, putting them together, and I'm building something really big and special that someone can buy and put a lot of money to work. But you can do this on a small scale too. And so knowing that they have to put the money to work works to my advantage. But it's not just a case of buying 4 or 5 companies and slamming them together and saying, here's a meal, come buy it. That company has to have balanced growth. We need a company that's got a good organic growth story. So it's growing organically. I'm raising price, I'm getting volume, I'm selling more contracts, I'm selling more widgets, whatever I'm doing, I'm installing more HVAC systems. We got to have organic growth. We got to be able to demonstrate that when we're putting these companies together, that we're able to harness some synergies. So not only am I getting bigger, but I'm growing organically and growing through M&A, but I'm also getting more profitable. So my cost structure should be going up at one pace, my revenue's going up at another, and the difference or the wedge between them is creating, it's called operating margin. It's like I'm increasing my operating margin. I'm creating leverage, operating leverage. As I get bigger, I get more profitable because my cost structure grows at a different pace. And so I have to be able to demonstrate all of this to a potential buyer. And so, a common mistake I see, Ron, I was looking, talking to someone who's in an industry, and it's like, they're in Texas and small company, and they're going to go buy the second company, and they're buying it in Wyoming. And I'm like, are you freaking nuts? Read my books. It's like, we don't want to collect a company in California, one in Texas, one in New York, and one in Florida, and they're all small. That's not an integrated, empire. That's a collection, of 4 small companies that are in 4 entirely different markets. We want to build density. We want to build regions. I want to build a region. I want to build a state, a multi-state. I want to build one region, then build second regions, and then I shoot for national and then international. It's like the story has to make sense. It's not just our size. We have to have organic growth story. We have to have margins improving. We have to have a fragmented market so that, we can continue this buy and build. So I'm working with someone right now. It's a moderately fragmented to low fragmented market. Literally, there's only about 200 companies in this industry. But it's a $70 billion industry that's expected to grow to $100 billion. The problem is, without the fragmentation, I can't do the buy and build. There's not enough things to buy. And so I can't climb the pyramid fast enough. And I'm competing with 50% of the world's markets controlled by a handful of giant companies. And so private equity is not going to like that industry. A strategic's going to love it, because there's not a lot of opportunities to grow through acquisition. So there's a lot to this. There's a lot to the story. So it's not just I buy some stuff, put it together, and I'm going to make a bunch of money. And so you got to learn all these little nuanced things in order to build a company that's going to be very attractive to a buyer universe when it's time for you to exit. So it's more than just buying stuff and slamming it together and calling it good. There has to be a strategy, and it has to have balanced growth in a fragmented market. Needs, not wants, recurrent versus project, low capital expenditure, high free cash flow. You start to build that profile. Now you got something, and you know what? You're going to be one of the small percentage of people that get it right.
Does it matter depending on the industry? Just go back to I like to stick with one model because it keeps my thoughts straight. Go back to the bookkeeping model, and a lot of people are doing the back office in the Philippines or the India back office and stuff. And there's no physical. Some of these, a lot of these don't have a physical office, right? The entire company works from their home, or each independent employee has a space where they go to work. Is it still critical that you tackle a market and create synergies in a market and then go out from there, or does that
So
dissolve when you?
yeah. So to answer your question, when I'm saying it's like I'd rather have them, we were talking about home services companies and trucks that have to show up. I mean, that's where I want the contiguous nature. There's a lot of companies I work with that are instantaneously global potential, but probably covering a country. So I work in a lot of IT managed services provider companies. They sell you cloud, they sell you licenses for Office
Right.
and bandwidth and things like that. That company is virtual. It doesn't have to be bricks and mortar. So I could collect them in disparate places and it would be okay. It would be acceptable. So it does,
Okay.
good point that you brought it up. Glad you brought it up. It does depend on the industry. If I'm thinking, blue collar services, guys in trucks doing stuff, that needs to have a contiguous nature to it. But a lot of professional services companies do not require that component. So I think also COVID really helped the buyer universe, regardless, wanted to see bricks and mortar and butts and seats and people doing things. But I think COVID taught the world that we could be remote and that it was okay to be remote. And so I think the buyer universe tolerance for remote and virtual companies has gotten so much more broader and so many it's so much more acceptable to people, but there's still some rules. You and I were talking in the green room about financing companies, and so I'll tell you that lenders still want to see, if you're a US lender and you have a virtual company that's in South Africa, you're going to have a hard time getting financing, certainly from US lenders. And so there's some kind of revenue requirements now where, hey, I want to see 75% of the revenue coming out of the country where the debt is.
Right.
And so I don't necessarily have to be there. I could create an entity there, but the revenue needs to be there that supports the debt service. And so I do see, kind of different types of requirements now. The world's changed a lot since COVID already. And, and it wasn't all for the worst. I think for some industries and some businesses, it really opened up an acceptance in this concept of being a virtual company, no bricks and mortar, and people are still paying high prices for companies. And by virtue of being virtual and not having infrastructure, boy, margins are higher. And if I have a broader ability to hire people because I am virtual, boy, I can get great talent because I can increase the scope of where I'm looking for talent. So a lot of positives I think that have come since COVID in terms of acceptance in how these businesses could be structured.
Without going candidate versus candidate, and we don't ever talk about politics on here, I think it's critical that we bring up the topic of it is an election year. We've been in an economy for a while that I would classify as uncertain. They don't know if it's a recession. They don't know if it's a depression. They don't know if it's going, to recover. And in an election year, typically in my mind, there's some falsehoods that go on. There's some artificial trying to hold it steady because no incumbent, is going to get reelected ever if the markets and the economy is tanking. So they do their best to make it look good. How do you think that's affecting the private equity world and the world of us buying companies? It being an election year, and to be honest, we have two very diverse candidates, right? We have the choice of very, very right or very, very left, pretending they're not so left, but they're very, very they're on the opposite ends of the pole. There's nobody in the middle here. So it's gonna change no matter,
Yeah.
we're not gonna get any, status quo when this election's over. A lot of things will change. How do you think that's impacting where we are in the market?
What business needs is stability, predictability. We need to know that the world, if regardless of who wins the election, there's different visions and they're pretty extreme. It's like, as a business person, how do I plan for different extremes? And I think reckless spending in general by both parties, by all politicians, who don't understand what an economy really is because they've never been in it. They're career politicians living in fantasy land. It's like, we recently, we were in a period of very low interest rates for a long time, artificially low.
Yeah.
And then we went to high inflation and high interest rates, and boy, did that have a damper on the expansion of businesses. And a lot of industries got hammered hard because of higher interest rates. What businesses need is stability, economic stability. We need to be able to plan, and we can't have these big vacillations in policy that come. And that's what's been happening. And I think one of the I'll also go one step further. And again, this isn't Republican or Democrat. But we also can't govern through presidential decree, either side. And all these changes that are only temporary because they only remain in effect while the current person is sitting in power. Next person comes in, rescinds all those, and puts in their own, executive orders, which now changes the dynamic. We need stability. Last night I went and saw the movie Reagan. We loved it. My wife and I thought it was great. But the interesting part was there was a time where Reagan had gotten shot. He's in the hospital, and who comes to see him, hang out with them, and was his best buddy? Tip O'Neill, a Democrat. And I joke with people and I say, give me Bill Clinton with Newt Gingrich, or give me Ronald Reagan with Tip O'Neill. Give me that combination any day of the week, because back then we could still talk to each other and we could still get things done. And there was a stability. The difference between left and right was kind of marginal. Now we're like this, and the wobbles are bigger. And so the economy is much more volatile. And so we do need to be careful as entrepreneurs about shifting sands and changing potential policies. And I think that leads us to say we don't want to become over levered. We want to make sure that we've got, sufficient cash flow cushion. So anytime I'm doing a buy and build, I am always planning for debt and debt service coverage ratio to be at least 2-to-1. So if I have $1 million in cash flow, I want to use $500,000 to service debt maximum, because I want a 2-to-1 cushion. Because if something changes or the economy goes south or dips, I want to make sure that as my revenue is doing this, I still have enough cash flow coming in, to service the debt that I've got on the business. So from a debt perspective, we can't be as wild and crazy as potentially we were when interest rates were close to zero. And so volatility is the enemy of growth, period. Give me bad policy but predictable, or great policy but predictable, and I can build a business. But I can't build a business when things are in flux constantly. That hurts. And it's not just the US, folks. It's like there's instability globally. Look at what's going on in the UK. Look at what's going on in France. I mean, we have some volatility in general in I'll call it the Western world right now. And all of that volatility makes it very hard to be a business owner, who's levered to the max and trying to thrive when the economy can do this at any moment. We see big swings in the stock market. We see, general trend up, which is good, and reckless spending and high interest rates, it's some point, all those chickens come home to roost.
I like what you said about, there's one thing you brought up during the statement there that really caught my attention, and that was the debt to income ratio, or your debt coverage. I think it's a mistake that a lot of small business buyers, acquirers get into, is they think that they do an SBA loan, as long as the SBA approves of their loan, then it must be okay. And sometimes they don't understand the cyclical nature of their own business, even throughout the single year. But a lot of times those cycles are much longer. If you look at real estate, for instance, I used to own a real estate investment firm. The cycle kind of dried up on us because the market, we dealt only in distressed properties. So bank foreclosures, that type of stuff, bank owned properties and stuff. Well, in 2017, the market got so hot that those dried up. People were paying market value for distressed houses. There was nothing for us to buy, right? We owned a bunch of them, but our acquisition side just really kind of dried up, or we had to get real competitive, and in my mind, probably overpay what we should be doing. We were, in Tulsa and in some of the markets we were in, we could buy houses at 60 to 70 cents on the dollar. That went away. We're having to pay, we have to do the speculation game. We're paying 100 cents on the dollar and expecting it to go up a little bit by the time we're done with the project to make a profit. And I just didn't want to play the game.
Yeah, and to your point, the SBA will approve debt coverage ratios as low as 1.2-to-1. So an SBA loan, and that's part of the government guaranteeing and trying to help people get started in small business. But at 1.2-to-1, if you have a 10, 15% drop, in revenue, which happens in a heartbeat in a recession, by its very nature, you could then be out of pocket. You're upside down. Now I got to come out of pocket with capital. If I don't have that capital, I'm in trouble. And And so I like to target 2 to 1. If you bought a house and put down a 50% down payment, you would not feel over levered. You would think, hey, I got 50% equity. Life is good. I'm great. Well, if I got a business that's generating 2 times the cash I need to service the debt, that's great. And if the business drops 10, 20%, I'm still got plenty. I'm still distributing money to myself, in that kind of environment. So, yeah, I think in different economic cycles, we have to be careful about the type of leverage. But that's also why I focus on a certain type of business, because the stability in revenue is more inherently built in to some of these kinds of companies that we're talking about versus like that wants based or project based business where, if I was a construction company, and Wall Street hates construction, typically low margin and so cyclical. If I was building pools and all of a sudden we're in a steep recession, nobody's building a pool. They're just not, and so my universe of potential projects is now shrunk. And I see this all the time in businesses that are heavily cyclical, and a lot of construction businesses are that way. And so can you make money? Sure. In a boom, all people make money. All boats do just fine in fair weather. But when the economic storm hits, if you don't have a good boat, you sink, so we do have to be careful about these things. And I think stability in politics is a cornerstone that helps us at least understand what the playing field's going to look like so that we can adapt.
A lot of people don't understand, and a lot of people have a false sense of ego when they're taking over these businesses. They think they're going to go in and buy a company that somebody's owned for 10, 20, 30 years, and overnight they're going to improve upon it and run it better than the guy that's been in the seat for 30 years. And in my mindset,
Boy, you just described every search fund in the country right there in that statement, because that's exactly the premise: is someone coming out of an MBA program is going to take a business that's been around for 30 years and magically make it better.
I play on a different realm where do fractional ownership, and I come in and do some stuff. But that said, what are some of the, so you've named off some industries you're already working in. You're named off some industries that you like. Is there any industry out there you're like, look, if a client came to me and they were trying to do a roll up in this, and maybe they need to, or maybe they need to own one already, maybe they don't. But is there anything you see out there you're not playing in that's really right for it? And you're like, man, if the right person came to me, I'd really like to play in this particular industry. I think it's prime for it.
Yeah, well, we've talked a lot about
Mhm.
bookkeeping. I'm going to start with bookkeeping. I started helping other people look at bookkeeping companies, get their roll-ups going, and I started looking under the hood, and I'm like, good Lord, I can buy $1 million worth of cash flow a year for 3 million. And even if I buy 100%, I've got 2 to 1 debt coverage. I mean, that smells of success. And no capital expenditures at all. Product is right here, and there's 1.8 million of them, and so I jumped on the bandwagon. So I'm going to do my own, in that space. So if you're an accountant, bookkeeping firm out there, and you want to do a roll up with me, call me up. I'll let you ride my coattails, and I'll make you a bunch of money. So it's that's an industry I like. I do like. So anything that meets that profile. I'll tell you though, I'm gonna go the opposite on you. So what industries don't I like?
That was
Or
gonna be the
stay
next
away from?
question.
Yeah, I work with a lot of people, and so they already have a business. And so I don't tell them abandon what you're doing and try something else. It's like, sometimes people start companies, they have passions for whatever. It's like, one of my clients is in the restaurant business. That's a really tough slog. I would never recommend restaurants to anyone. It's like you're going to work 7 days a week. You're not going to have a life, and you're going to be lucky to stay in business for 5 years, and it's a tough slog. But there are people out there who do it, who have franchises that are very successful. They have multiple locations, and and they make a ton of money. So it can happen. You can make money anywhere, but certain industries are a tough slog. It's just hard. It's difficult. And that would be, kind of that would be an example. A lot of retail environments are a tough slog anymore, and they're so cyclical. And so, but I work in a lot of trades areas where I would tell you they don't check all my boxes. People can make money, but I don't know that I do it again. I just came out of an HVAC one, and I would tell people, it's like, this is a space where you want to get in, hit quick, and get out. It's like you don't want to be the last guy playing musical chairs when the multiples crash, because some insane multiples were being paid for certain industries. And so I think there are some I can make money anywhere, but there are some profiles that just fit better and make the probability of success higher. And so because I'm 60 now, I don't have any time left for failure, Ron. So I'm focused on stuff where, man, the deck is stacked in my favor. I'm going to make money. I know I'm going to make money. And I think of wealth management, insurance companies. I think of independent insurance companies. I think of bookkeeping and accounting on the professional services side, blue collar services, still like, janitorial type services, anything with a contract, anything that's recurrent revenue and fragmented. And so even I would avoid certain trades-based businesses now and just focus on, where do I have a signed contract? Getting up in the first of the month and wondering where 80-90% of my revenue is going to come from this month. That's stressful. That's a stressful situation.
You do know I own a food services business, right?
A food services. Well, hey, I got to tell you.
It's a food truck and catering thing. It's my wife and my son run it, but I manage it for them.
I was going to say though, so I did work with somebody in Florida not too long ago who was looking at a food services type company, but what they did is they signed contracts with venues. So like they own like this small concert venue for 5 years, and it's like they have a captive position where if you're going to the event, you're going to eat their food, and so they were doing catering, they were doing event type work, and their model was very profitable. And so there are rare exceptions anywhere. I'm talking about just opening up a restaurant.
Yeah.
That is a tough business. So
you gave me a great idea,
listen,
though.
Ron,
I'm going to pitch all the event venues around here and have their little, because we have both the, right now they only have, it's mobile. They can take it anywhere. So it's a food tent and everything, everything fits in a little trailer and then go set it up. Eventually we're going to get them a truck and maybe a trailer. But right now we can set up inside an event or outside of the event or whatever. That's a brilliant idea. We should go lock down some of the event centers around and say, hey, we'll come and make treats for your every event you hold for the next 5 years for X number per whatever. So
yeah, and it's some kind of revenue share, and then they don't have to own that business. Hey, Ron, I'm going to have to run. I got people waiting on me. It's like you and I chat all day, every day. But
we're a little overtime on this one. Let's call it. How do people, before we do that real quick, how do people get a hold of you? And then we'll wrap it up.
LinkedIn. Adam Coffey on Instagram and Facebook is fake. And if they try to monetize you, I warned you, you'll find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, but I'm not really active on Twitter. You'll find me on LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn. Why am I on LinkedIn? Because there's 800 million business people on LinkedIn, and my client is on LinkedIn. So that's where I'm at. That's where I spend all my time. That's the easiest way to find me.
Awesome. Well, we'll call that a show. Hang out for a second so we can download the file, and we'll wrap this up. Thank you for being here today.
Take care, Ron.
I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between $5 million and $30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.